My own experience with ayahuasca was going on a retreat when I was about 21 to the mountains in the Andes in Peru. If people feel this, you feel it, you felt it nagging at you, you've wanted to do it, you know you want to do it, right? Like it's going to happen at the right time that it's meant to. View it as a commitment to yourself to implement the ideas that you receive and have the courage, right? Like you receive the vision because you're the one capable of implementing it. It's going to take a long time to play out. You need to recover after. There's a recovery part that's not talked about. Like it's a high load on like your whole system, depending on how you're built. And you need to just be easy and slow with yourself.
Hello, what's up, party people? Welcome back to the Cosmic Bridge. So today we're going to be talking about ayahuasca. So when it comes to ayahuasca, if you haven't pressed pause or stop the video by now and you're continuing to listen, you're probably in three camps, right? So the first one is you're thinking about doing ayahuasca, you've not done it before, and you're thinking, how do I choose a shaman? How do I choose a place to do it? How do I prepare? So we're going to be covering those things today. Second, you may just be interested in learning more about ayahuasca and what it is. You've heard it a few times and you've heard like celebrities talking about it as well as, your friends. And then the third one is maybe you've actually done ceremonies before, but you didn't really get what you wanted out of it. And you're looking for better tips about how do you integrate. Or even the fourth one, you like myself, you've done it a few times. It actually did have a positive impact, but you're just looking to learn more. So we're going to be covering all of those bases today. So whatever camp you fall in with ayahuasca, we're going to be talking about that. So let me now introduce the guest of the show. So he's called Jake Housdon. He actually runs his own retreat called Casa del Otorongo. Otorongo is the Quechua word for jaguar spirit, and this is in Peru. What's interesting about Jake is he's got a similar background to me in sales leadership. So he's actually been a head of sales 3 times, was earning a lot of money, had stock options in his company, and he gave it all up to go and do this, right? So he's obviously very passionate about it. He gave up the material side. But what's interesting about Jake as well is he is into this thing of how can we integrate spiritual experiences, these visions, these experiences we have on things like ayahuasca, how can we integrate that into our daily lives? So he's going to be talking about that. So let's get into the show and speak to Jake. Jake, thanks a lot for coming on the show today. I believe you're not in Peru by your retreat though. You're over in Canada, is that right?
Yeah, I'm up in Canada visiting family for a while with my girlfriend, but I'll be back to Peru pretty soon. And I miss the jungle right now. I'm always in contact with my team there. And, I'm just getting photos on WhatsApp of like the new houses we're building and, the rain and, just all the awesome jungle stuff. So, and it was funny actually the other day, I was having my weekly one-on-one with Eric. So Eric, basically, he's like our head of operations. He takes care of, the entire retreat center. Master of all trades, really. I don't even think jack of all trades applies in case. Um, but yeah, so it was snowing a lot here in Canada. So like, for him, it's super cool to see the snow, even if it's on WhatsApp. So I like just went out in the snow beside a tree and stuff and just was like, my computer was getting all snowy, but it was kind of fun to just like share that moment with him. And he was getting all fired up, like, oh, I've only seen snow, in
Oh,
movies
wow.
and stuff like that, right? So yeah, anyway, I'm really excited to get back there.
Yeah. Eric, is he from Peru or is he from?
He's from Peru, so he's born and raised in the jungle. He's actually born in a town a little bit further down the river from ours. Ours is called Genaro Herrera. So
Okay.
a bit of a tongue twister if your Spanish isn't too good, but so he's lived there for a long time too. So yeah, he's from the jungle. He's a mestizo person, is you know, the way culturally, I guess, the mix of indigenous
Mm,
bloodlines with, the Spanish that came at some point
yeah.
to Peru, right? So yeah.
Nice. Well, let's get into your journey with plant medicine. Because I was just in the outro saying obviously you got this big background in sales leadership. I'm like myself, but obviously now you're involved in this retreat. So like how did this happen? What's been your own experience with ayahuasca?
So my own experience with ayahuasca was going on a retreat when I was about 21 to the mountains in the Andes in Peru, near a town called Huaraz. The retreat center was called the Way Inn. I went there with my sister, and that was me responding to just this like epic curiosity and like desire that I had, to go drink ayahuasca since I was like in grade 10 in high school or something like that. So, I didn't necessarily seek out ayahuasca because I felt that I, was hurting or needed some deep healing. I more sought it out because I just felt this like extreme calling. And I had had so many experiences with plants that, really made it clear to me that kind of communicating with plants and, like being an ambassador for plants and understanding the way that plants can help humanity to heal and then helping to facilitate all of that would be a big part of my life's work. So I was just following that like passion and curiosity, frankly. And then during that retreat, I just had this profound sense of knowing, basically, after one of the ceremonies in the morning when we were doing the sharing circle. I was just crying, bawling like a little baby. I'd like never really cried like that, I don't think. It was just like continuous, like for really, really long. And it just felt so joyful because the emotion that was flooding through me was like this realization to one of the things that was stressing me out the most, that stresses a lot of us out the most, is like, what's my calling? Like, what am I meant to do? And I just saw how so many of my like diverse sort of eclectic interests aligned in this one thing. And that was like, okay, like you're going to create a retreat center and, a place like this and, do this type of work, but also walk the shamanic path. Like I very much felt this like calling towards learning the medicine myself. Um, so yeah, and then I was also at the time the maestro ayahuasquero that we worked with. He invited me to be his apprentice. He told me, the medicine is very fond of you, and he offered me this kind of like path of initiation at the time. I was like, again, 21. I had just, I guess I was a couple years into like being in this early stage startup company that was building a mobile app for your campus that was like made by students for students. And it was, really alluring and sexy. So my plan was like not to go live this like semi-ascetic lifestyle because I knew what was entailed in learning the medicine. But to go like, work ambitiously in the startup world, like earn a big bag of cash and then go do that after was like the way I saw my life unfolding. And I had that vision for my life from a really young age. Like I'm talking like, you know, like grade school, like before middle school, like really young. Like I just always pictured my life that I would do something to achieve like society's definition of success. And then I would kind of use myself as an example and go like way off into something in the wilderness or something mystic. And I would, be like a credible example for people to highlight that this is a path, worth taking. And there's, things that lie in these realms that are actually, very helpful for humanity and its evolution at this point. So I didn't know what it was. I just kind of almost like saw the trajectory in my mind and I would like just think of that because I was someone who I felt like I had a lot of abilities and like I just functioned really well at like school and like, like all the normal society type stuff. But like what was driving my heart was like this whole other world. So like reconciling that was always this sort of inner journey with a little bit of conflict along the way. So
Just going a step back before you even took ayahuasca, you said you were like interested in plants and communicating with plants. Could you tell us more about that? What type of plants are you talking about?
yeah, so I guess I loved plants like before I started imbibing plants for any sort of plant medicine purposes. Like I just love trees, plants. Had this moment in my grandmother's garden when I was really little where a maple sort of like helicopter little seed fell through the air and I caught it. And then I planted it in the garden and then like a maple tree grew in like among her flower bed. And that always like enchanted me. And she was like, "You have such a green thumb." Like, wow. And like I just always felt like that. I felt like this like green kid from a young age. I loved being in the forest. Lunch recess, all I was doing was catching grasshoppers and praying mantises and snakes. So then I encountered cannabis. That, you know, really opened me up. Like we all have incredible experiences. Maybe not we all with cannabis, but from a young age, I was just having these like experiences where it felt like the plant was talking to me. I remember literally sitting in the shed beside my parents' house, like growing up. I was in like high school. We had to sneak around then the odd time and stuff, right? With cannabis and stuff. And I was in the shed with my friend, having a little session, as we'd call it back then. And yeah, and like I remember him saying that, like we would just get into these deep philosophical conversations where we feel like we're like almost like channeling something. And he's just like, why are the plants like talking to us? And that was my friend Jeremy. Shout out to Jeremy. He's passed away. But him and I were kind of like pioneers in investigating those realms, kind of like you often have your buddy. It's kind of your, co-pilot
Mm,
when you're young like that. So he was like that for me. So yeah, I still carry forward a lot of his like memory in the work I do now and
mm,
stuff. He wanted to come and learn from the shamans in Peru and all that stuff too. Um, and I'm really passionate about educating around all these topics too, because I think that we keep plants in this stigmatized like shadow state as
yeah.
humanity, clearly cannabis and other ones. The world's sort of changing their mindset on that, but there's still a lot of this out there. And I think what ends up happening too is a lot of young folks encounter these plants and they have these incredible experiences that are very helpful and positive in their
Mm,
lives. And then they reflect upon, the finger wagging tone in which they're told not to partake. And they can't help but then say, well, okay, well, if they're wrong about this one, what about this? And
yeah.
it's often this like blast off awakening experience. And then a lot of
Mm,
kids, into other things from there just because we don't really have enough honest conversations about like substances and stuff
yeah.
like that I too, right? So
So with cannabis, and maybe I'll talk about something that we'll then talk about with ayahuasca later. So we've had ayahuasca shamans and like journalists and stuff that have come on the show before, and I think one of the things they talk about is like intention is very important. Like you should never go into in a ceremony and just be like, I want to trip, right, or have visions or whatever it is. There's got to be like a good intention for doing a ceremony. And cannabis, in terms of like using cannabis therapeutically, right, or for spiritual means, is not
yeah.
something I have much awareness about. But I would imagine it's the same. And I do know people that have like used cannabis in more of a destructive way and have ended, smoking every day and to get to sleep and have ended up like having to give it up. So I think there
Yeah.
is obviously like a line with cannabis as one of like, yeah, what's your experience with that? Of like, kind of just from more of like a therapeutic perspective versus like, actually being quite destructive.
Yeah, so I think we're diving into a really important topic, which is like when spirituality becomes escapism and when plant
Mm,
medicine becomes escapism, right? And a trait that cannabis has is it can provide a significant amount of comfort, right? To the body, to the emotion, right? To the nervous system. So because it can become this soother for you, like a baby, when you have a soother in your mouth, right?
yeah.
Babies are often like when they have to grow out of that, they don't want to take the soother out of their mouth. Actually, when I was a
Mm,
baby, I'm a very creature comfort kind of guy. So I've been through all this with cannabis, to the nth degree, basically, right? Like I've self-medicated myself, soothing myself to a level that, sort of took away from my ability to operate in the world and be effective as an
mm,
entrepreneur and things like that, right? So that's why I'm really keen on teaching people the scaffolding around this.
mm,
And when I say scaffolding, that's very intentional because the thing with cannabis is it requires structure in order to work with. So look, there's nothing wrong with having the intention to comfort yourself, to soothe yourself, to escape something, actually. Escapism can be very healthy. It's a necessary part of like the human experience to a degree. And everything's in the context of what are your goals? Like if you're trying to just chill out and have, you know what I mean? Fill your
yeah.
boots. Power to you. All good, man. Right. But look, a lot of the listeners are people like you and I. They're people who are ambitious. They're people who are building things in the world, and their ability to manifest those things is very important to them. So, in order to not compromise that, you need to have structure. Cannabis is ruled by the planet of Saturn. Saturn is about teaching us structure, order. It's this very Capricorn. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. It's about like structuring things and stuff like that. So
Okay.
cannabis is actually teaching you that you need to, in order to work with it, structure yourself very well, or else the areas where you're prone to just getting lost in comfort escapism, that's gonna happen to you. So part of the teaching, part of the dojo of working with cannabis is learning to make decisions for yourself between when you're intentionally seeking comfort and when you're intentionally working and creating these guardrails and structures. So the concept of a cadence in selling, you need to have the same concept when you work with cannabis. So that's something that I am writing about now and getting ready actually to
Oh,
release like a community about, but is like you need to have a cannabis cadence. Like you need to bookend your experience. You need to decide on the timing of when you do it, all of these things, right? And it's individual. And if you want to do really deep shamanic work with cannabis, then it requires like fasting from it and having like a time away, right? You can work with cannabis to the degree that you can work with ayahuasca. Like you can go into very deep shamanic states and things, right? But that's not going to happen if your usage is too high as well.
interesting. So it's like you mentioned the cadence, right? So people that don't know what the cadence is, a cadence in sales is like you do this call, then you do a LinkedIn message, and you do an email or whatever. But you're saying soon with cannabis, it's the same where you set aside like weekly or monthly times. Like, how does that work?
Yeah, I would recommend that if you are trying to work with cannabis in a way that you don't impede your productivity, basically. So the trick is, yeah, to have a cadence. If you're just starting out, like a great cadence is like Saturday morning. That would be your cannabis, your
Mm,
sit with cannabis. Your intention would be to receive creative insight, to tap into your imagination and to like tap into, your soul and like building from the inside out and getting
mm,
guidance. And then in that ceremony, you would do things to create a sense of protection first. You would set intention, you'd communicate with the plant, you would imbibe the plant. You could have some movement in music. That's always helpful. It's not needed. You could be sitting, you could be in a forest, you could be doing different things. But what you're doing is you're setting the intention to be in a receptive state and to allow things to come in. And you're not trying to go and produce those things into something yet. You're just doing that and you let that experience happen. You take the odd insightful note that comes to you, you save that away. And then the next day, you get to work on what you actually received. And that's in a different state of mind where you're actually producing, you're in convergent style thinking, right? The masculine, the yang sort of archetype, time to do something, make something out of it. Whereas before you were in a divergent thinking. And where people go wrong is they try to basically do convergent tasks, like things they have to do in everyday life, but they're putting themselves into this like didn't set an intention, working with a very feminine, potentially chaotic plant spirit. And they're trying to do like tasks which require a high amount of logic or focus. There's other ways you can also do that with cannabis, but it's not necessarily like smoking. And there's so much about strains and terpenes and edible
mm.
versus, but just trying to shed a little bit of light based on what you
Yeah.
asked there.
She mentioned the like chaotic, feminine, more energy. So
Yep.
if you're in more of like a chaotic situation, that's not really a time you want to be like experimenting with cannabis, right?
Yeah, I mean, depending on what your goal is, right? Like, chaos is sometimes necessary. Chaos can be fun, right? Think of like a mosh pit at a concert, right? Some people that's their idea of fun. But I think you're gonna amplify the state that you bring into it as
Mm,
well. Right? So, um, yeah, you're gonna get even more chaotic. But you do need to be in a safe place, or you ought to
yeah,
be, right? Because you're opening your spirit, your energy field, and you want to be in a place where you feel safe to do that. But again, it's not saying don't go to a music festival and enjoy the music and open yourself there. It's just with intention, with protection, and
yeah.
all those things, right?
Okay. Yeah, I think we could probably do a whole nother podcast on cannabis therapy, but let's get into the ayahuasca stuff. So we'll go back to your journey. So as you said, you did the ceremony when you were younger. You then went into more of like the entrepreneurship, sales leadership. During that time when you were more like in the corporate world, were you going to ceremonies then? Like, were you still like, no, you just took a period off it?
Yeah, no, I had 4 ayahuasca ceremonies and I've had no other ceremonies to date. So I had one retreat and I'm still implementing the vision that I received during that.
Wow.
Like that's been my path. A good doctor tries to get rid of their patients, right? So that's again the themology of like escapism and stuff. A message I got from ayahuasca was like, look, like you know everything you need to know in terms of spiritual exploration right now and things like that. Like just walk the path that's in front of you in life. You know what I mean? Because when you're young, we often seek out the experiential qualities, right? It's fun
Yeah.
to experience these altered states of perception. And I was someone who certainly had a lust for exploring that. And that led to a lot of incredible insights. But at a certain point, again, it's, you need to honor the like integration and the polarity,
Mm.
ebbing and flowing between those states, but also the other, the more, productive states, right? So, um, yeah, for me, it wasn't going back to the medicine and stuff like that. That's kind of the stage I'm at right now. But it's kind of in a different vein too. Is just kind of like learning to facilitate and learning to, you know, be a hollow bone to like
Mm.
help people to receive the medicine and stuff like that. But at our retreat center, I'm not the maestro at this point. We work with locals, and then another friend and partner who he's from North America, but he learned and he was he trained as a maestro in the same village
Mm.
with the same teachers that we're using
Okay.
working.
So, okay, so as you said, you're more of a facilitator. You're kind of the. I know you said you had a head of operations, but you're like an operational figure of like, I guess, bridging people and getting the,
Yeah,
the
running the
right.
place,
Yeah,
owning
yeah,
the place. Yeah, exactly. Running the whole thing, generating all the demand for it. And then I've been initiated in a lineage of shamans from the Quero of the high
cool.
Andes in Peru, which we don't take plant medicine for that. And we're doing things like soul retrievals, destiny retrieval, removing, stuck imprints in your energy field from your chakras, things like that. And it pairs very well with plant medicine and ayahuasca. So I'm doing that kind of work in our retreats, but I'm not the maestro ayahuasquero.
So
I
how does
don't
that
have.
work? Sorry, the like energy retrieval you said, or yeah,
Yeah, so this stuff comes from the Quero people. So the Quero people, they're known as the last Incan lineage, basically.
mm.
When the conquest happened in Peru, they retreated and they went up into the very high Andes and they were able to
Yeah,
hide and preserve their culture, right? So then they came back and they reintegrated with society at some point. And they've been very keen to pass on their teachings and stuff because they view it as like the shamans of the future are not just Quero and stuff like that, right? It's like modern folks coming here and learning. Um, so they basically view it that they call it a luminous energy field, but in
yeah,
science, we just call it like a biomagnetic field, right? Like an electrical magnetical field that things have around them. Everything has it around it, right? Human beings have that too. And so that they view as like the architecture that like informs your physical body. And they
yeah.
view the chakras as the screw points, like the connection point between this torus shaped luminous energy field, then connecting through the chakras. And the chakras are aligned where you have a nerve plexus with hormone glands. So it's the place where like electrical energy converts to like analog, like hormonal body signals.
Mm.
So it's basically the connection point between your energetic self and then your physical self. And so their entire paradigm is that like even physical ailments, come from, an energetic source. Emotions are just energy, right? Energetic things from the ex motio in Spanish, emotion, like exterior motion coming into our interior system. But the problem happens when we encounter an emotion through our nervous system and then it doesn't get processed and passed through for some reason,
Mm.
right? Maybe it was traumatic and we had to like put out an airbag and deal with the situation at hand and we couldn't process through that. Or could be a variety of reasons. We all have our sort of traumas or like our like unresolved emotional things deep
Mm.
down in us. And what's happening is like they view that as a dark pool of stagnant energy that's in your luminous energy field and it's seeking to be processed. It doesn't want to stay in
Mm.
that state. So it's causing things to happen and situations to come towards you that give it an opportunity to be healed. So that's why you have those repetitive patterns of like
Mm,
you had a traumatic relationship with whatever, and then you keep manifesting the same thing because you're trying to heal through it. So they, instead of you dealing with it at a more physical, mental, emotional, or even soul level, they go to the spirit level and they intervene directly in the luminous energy field and in the chakra that where this is getting in, and they remove it
mm,
from there. So that sets into motion a transformation that plays out over time at the soul level, at the mental, emotional, and then at the
mm,
physical. So it's like going upstream to do an intervention in a much more light, elegant, usually less intense way, although it can be somatic. I've had interventions done to me where I start almost purging. I had one the other day where I was purging physically during it, but it tends to be a lighter way to do like a very precise, because you focus on a specific pattern too. So you tell the practitioner the pattern and you blow the energy of it into a rock, actually, which sounds funny, but it's not, because a rock, look at Silicon Valley, look at data storage. It's all from the mineral kingdom of our earth, right? Silicon, all
mm.
these minerals. So shamans, they're just using minerals the same way people are using data storage. And they're saying, look, this is a mineral. You're putting through vibration, your intention, your energy, and you're blowing the pattern, the information of the pattern into the rock. And the rock gives them a storage. So then they can figure out in your energetic body, where is it getting in? Which chakra is it? And once they identify that, we spin the chakra counterclockwise. We put this special rock, which is an initiated shamanic rock called a kuya, on the
Mm.
chakra, and we engage in a process of cleaning out basically the dark energy, and then after filling it in with other energy to wipe out the affinity in the first place that drew this and allowed it to take root in you. So
Yeah.
that's kind of like to give a little bit of insight into that. Yeah.
So you mentioned you had an experience with this recently. So what
Yeah.
was it like? You had some type of emotional blockage, or like how did that work?
Yeah. So the pattern I worked on in that particular intervention was I had this very strange avoidance of like financial doing my like personal finances and like stuff like that. Like just like avoiding like things that I'm neglecting and things that I need to take care of. And I've had this recurring theme in my life. I've taken care of it and stuff. I've, gotten by, but it's always been like really like, I don't want to look at my banking app. I don't want to look at the money. I don't want to see how much I'm spending. We all have that a bit. I don't want to do
Mm,
my taxes. But for me, I could tell it was attached because it was very irrational. I would view these tasks as so difficult. And then I'm doing all these other difficult creative
yeah.
things. So, and it runs in my family. My mom has this a little bit, and so that's often a good sign that there's something. So anyway, I went in with this intention to summon this energy, all these feelings, these ideas. I did that, and it was found that I had a fluid energy in my field. Some people view that as like an entity, but a fluid energy that was like really causing this. So the shaman who worked on me actually used this like crystal to pull this energy out, um, and did the illumination. That's what we call the removal of the energy from the chakra. And during it, like as soon as I started summoning up the energy, I almost felt ready to vomit, frankly. And then when it came time to actually, when it came out, and it was my heart chakra, when it came out into the crystal, I literally had to run to the bathroom and just actually like have a dry heave type coughing purge type experience, similar to what happens in ayahuasca. So and after that, it led to a lot of emotional release that was the result of like this being removed and then other things coming to the surface. And I feel exceptionally better on this particular pattern a few days following it, basically. So
Well, very
yeah.
interesting.
Hmm.
So let's take a step back to the yeah, to the ayahuasca stuff. So obviously you've set up this retreat now. It's not something that most people will do in their life, like go to Peru and set up an ayahuasca retreat. So yeah, why have you done this? Like what drove this decision?
It just a deep calling that like this was what I was supposed to do. It was the thing that excited and enchanted me most out of anything that I experienced in life. And it just, felt like my purpose. It just felt like, you know, this is what I'm supposed to do. You know, and so then I just responded to that and with conviction and just like followed it and did it. So it's kind of that's like the simple answer. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I think a lot of people listening to this won't have done ayahuasca before, and I
Yep.
think it's obviously something that's becoming more and more popular. You see it in like the media and celebrity culture and all kinds of stuff. But let's imagine you've never done ayahuasca,
Mhm.
but you're like yourself. You know, a while back you kind of feel this calling. What advice would you give to people who are thinking like, "Oh, I want to go and do a ceremony, but I don't know where to start"? Apart from going to your retreat, which is the most obvious answer. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't suggest that's what they what they start with. I mean, if people feel this, you feel it, you felt it nagging at you, you've wanted to do it, you know you want to do it, right? Like it's gonna happen at the right time that it's meant to. So everyone's journey is gonna be unique with this, but like, of course, doing your research, figuring out like what's important to you. Like, is it important to you to go to the jungle and partake in ayahuasca in its natural setting with all of the energy that the jungle holds and all of the plant spirits that partake that are very close in the jungle there, animals and everything else? Or are you going to go to Costa Rica and you're going to have a more five-star resort experience and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Or do you want to be in the US, right? There's plenty of ceremonies that happen all over the US, frankly. There's legality now in certain places in the US. So I think it's like figuring out um, why are you doing this, doing your research, and then figuring out like the type of setting, things like that. And then also investigating different lineages because different lineages work with the medicine in different ways, right? There's indigenous lineages, like obviously the famous Shipibo, right? They have their own, format, style of ayahuasca, right? There's mestizo lineages that's different, right? The Icaros are in Spanish, some of them,
No.
and Quechua and other indigenous words. There's a different tone to it, right? There's some ayahuasqueros, they're paleros, so they work with trees, and that's a very different style of the medicine as well, right? So there's different countries have different styles, all that stuff. There's different durations of retreat, right? So I think those are some of the considerations, and then vetting the maestros, the maestras that you're working with, all of those things. We have a video of this in Spirit. So in
Okay.
Spirit is our like the network for conscious professionals that we're building. This isn't to like plug us or whatever. There's literally
Yeah.
a video by a maestro ayahuasquero, and he's explaining to you the things that if you feel this calling, what should you look into?
Mm.
How do you figure out where to go? All those things. He's one of the members of our community. So uh, if you want to look or whatever, if you
Yeah.
want
Nice. We'll
on
definitely
you,
put a link
yeah,
to it in the show notes.
cool.
And um, so you mentioned an interesting topic which I wanted to talk to you there about, like vetting the maestro and the shaman, because there are unfortunately a lot of like snakes out there who are, and there's loads of stories about that. Not in ceremonies for the right reasons. So how can you go about vetting shamans and like find the right person for you?
So I would be looking for lineage-based practitioners, like personally. If someone is not been initiated as part of a lineage that's carried this medicine for a long period of time, right? Like an indigenous lineage or mestizo lineage, I wouldn't work with them personally. That's not to say there is impossible to receive healing or things like that, but to me,
Mm.
working and seeing what it's like to be a part of a lineage now, like connected myself, there's a tremendous amount of help that's happening in the work that you're doing that's supported by the lineage that you're connected with. And obviously, they have like efficacy and safety built into the way they're doing things over
Yeah.
a tremendous period of time. I think now this was funny. I didn't know this word, but yoga wasqueros, they're calling them. So they're like people who they're like kind of good at music and playing the guitar and singing, and they've had like a little bit of time with ayahuasca and they've decided to start holding ceremony by themselves, right? And I don't feel that that's personally safe.
Mm.
Now at the same time, what an ayahuasquero that we work with, a maestro, says is that like ayahuasca is being currently more generous with these people and like allowing like safe experiences to take place in many cases and because of the level of healing that's needed for
Yeah.
humanity, right? And stuff like that. So it's like a little more lenient on people stepping outside of a little bit of the traditions and stuff. Um, but yeah, those would be the things to avoid. And then if you're actually in person, like just staring deeply into the person's eyes, right? And like the eyes don't lie, right? Like you're
Yeah.
gonna to feel if you feel safe with that person or not, right?
Yeah. Interesting. Just on the lineage thing, so just to clarify, by the lineage, do you mean, there's a deep history of, like, lots of people within, as you say, the indigenous community within the Amazons where ayahuasca comes from, and they've been trained by those people. Is that what you mean by lineage, or?
Yeah, I mean, they should be able to tell you the name of their teacher and the name of their teacher's teacher. And you know what I mean? Like, and that should be connected to, uh, a long lineage of healers that goes back in time, basically. And also, you feel free to ask people, like, even if it's online and you're messaging in questions or something, like savvy questions are like, how many ceremonies have you done? Like,
Yeah.
how many dietas have you had? Like if they don't want to tell you that stuff, that makes no sense to work with them, right? And there's a lot of people, they're like, I've been working with this plant medicine for 10 years. And then you drill into that, and they've like been going back and forth to the jungle and spending a month with their teacher a year for 10
Yeah.
years, and they call it 10 years. It's like,
Yeah.
so I wouldn't want that person doing heart surgery on me or something like that, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, so good. It's actually a good analysis, like heart surgery, because it is such a huge thing, right? And I think, yeah, ayahuasca can be a life-changing experience, but it can also be something that leads to like psychosis and death and all kinds. So you have to be. I think I always say this to people, like, don't take ayahuasca to trip. Like, take ayahuasca with clear intentions and treat it as medicine, not as some like recreational drug.
Yeah, I agree, 100%.
Mm,
And in the pura medicina, they have different intentions. So protection, healing, and another one is connection to the divine. So
yeah,
and cleaning, that's another one. So it's cleaning, protection, healing, and then connection to the divine. So it's saying like it's okay to want to connect to something, and to channel some information that's with intention, right?
yeah.
But you're not just trying to have fun or something.
Interesting. So cleaning, protection, connecting to the divine.
Yep.
Protection's interesting. The rest of them I kind of get. So protection, how would that, like, what would that be?
So it could manifest in a lot of different ways. But basically, a lot of the spirits, especially trees in the jungle, they're very
Mm,
protective spirits. And when people go on a dieta with a tree, I haven't done this, but when people do this, they receive Icaros, like energetic vibrational patterns that contain the medicine and allyship, almost like a phone number or calling card of the plant spirit that they've created this allyship with. And those Icaros, like they can be used to defend yourself. So why would you need to defend yourself? Well, there is this side to ayahuasca shamanism in the jungle where
mm,
it's combative, and they literally fight each other, and things like that. I don't talk about this a lot because my goal is not to really sensationalize and create fear and stuff like that among
so who's
people.
fighting? So the shamans are fighting with each
Shamans,
other, right? Oh
yes.
wow, okay.
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, that's like a big, big thing. So um, there's just this like sense of like that's just the paradigm of like some of the culture of the way some of the people have developed, right, and lived. I mean, look at like tribal indigenous roots. Some
Yeah,
tribes, the Matses, which are the closest to us where we are in the jungle, they're warriors, like they're extreme warriors. They don't work with ayahuasca actually, but just to give an idea, right? There's this warrior mentality inside of people, and um, you know, so there is stuff like that, and there's people who want to be the most powerful, and power trips and power games are, a big thing. So someone could come and enter your ceremonial space and be trying to hurt you, and they're somewhere else drinking ayahuasca at the same time, or they're, things like that, right? So the ability of the shaman to protect everyone involved is really
mm,
important. There's like virotes, there's darts that they're shooting at each other and stuff, and they have to protect that from coming
wow,
into the ceremony. There's all kinds of crazy stuff, right? So protection, and then it becomes a fine line between protection and like weaponizing.
mm,
So, right, like sometimes there's people they're attacking other shamans, and then they have to battle them. And then at the end, they take their medicine, they take their icaros from them, and they view it as like taking a weapon from a baby. But it's like you have to be careful. It's a slippery slope. When does protection become offense? When it's the right
Yeah.
use of force, all these things. So yeah, there's a protective side.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. Yeah, never heard of that before. So very
No?
interesting.
Yeah.
Uh, so I wanted to, with the shaman thing, I wanted to ask, is interesting with your retreat because you've got, as you said, local maestros that are Peruvian, but then you also mentioned you've got like a North American maestro that you've worked with before. To go into the fact you still want someone that's got like long lineage, is it that he's, even though he's North Americans, he's not from the Amazons, he's been trained by people in the Amazons who are from a long lineage? Is that why he's, legitimate?
Exactly. 100%. You nailed it. And the other thing, and so just to give people an idea, like this training process is like, you know, 50, 80 dietas where you're isolating yourself in the jungle, taking an extremely bland, simple diet, completely alone, drinking a certain plant, right? Interacting with that plant, learning it, doing that like 80 times, doing like 1,200, 1,500, 1,300 ceremonies of ayahuasca. And in his case, like over a period of like, I may have some of the numbers like a tiny bit off, right? But it's, and having all this happen in like 4.5 years, like in a row and stuff, like where you're drinking ayahuasca like 5 times a week type of thing and stuff, right? So that's the level of hardcore training and stuff. Like it's
Yeah,
not, right? And then you have people that are
that's
like, cool, I'm gonna go do this.
uh,
It's like, oh, bro, like, no.
that's no joke. Five
Yeah.
times a week ayahuasca is no joke.
Oh, yeah. That's,
Uh,
and normally it's not that fast if you're local because you have to make a living for yourself at the same time and support
yeah,
your family. So, but some people who come from the foreign world, they have enough money and they can just keep learning.
yeah,
So anyway, that's exactly it. And then what happens is you become energetically connected to the lineage. The lineage is passed on to you. You're connected, and they call it a mesa that you're connected to, and that means table. But it's this like sort of not the knights around the round Arthur's round table, but it's something like that within their energetic space that they're all connected to, where they have all their energy and connection to this medicine that they've created as part of the lineage. And people try to enter that mesa, and they try to enter it through the weakest link, which is the student. So that's why someone who's training an apprentice, they have to protect the student a lot, and the student becomes like the easy way for the opposing shamans to try to enter the mesa and stuff like that. So it's interesting. But yeah, that's
interesting. Yeah.
exactly. Mhm.
So I think your journey personally is interesting, and I connect with it a lot. And obviously, the theme of the podcast of like the cosmic bridge and how can we take spiritual experiences, but actually like learn from them and put them into our daily lives, right? Into what we call the material on the show. So I think what's
Yep.
interesting with you is, as you said earlier, you're not the shaman. You haven't done the 80, taking it 80 times in the dieta, but you seem more of like that bridge, the facilitator, where you're trying to help people bring them to this retreat. But I know you're also passionate, and you post about this a lot, of like actually like implementing it in daily life. So I guess I wanted to come to you and talk about, because we had another person who's very involved in ayahuasca, Tom Jenkins, and he talked about like so many people take ayahuasca and then the next weekend they're like drinking and doing all kinds of like negative stuff affecting their bodies. So like what are some of the bad things people do after an ayahuasca ceremony, and then what are some of like the positive like ways you can actually integrate it in like a positive sense into your life?
Yeah, so I would say time. Time is the key variable that people neglect in the equation of integration, right? Integration is a process of like experimentation first. So, um, you've cleared things out with ayahuasca, you've gotten connected to certain aspects of yourself, you've, reclaimed parts of yourself, you've processed some stuck emotion, you've created space for new things to come in, you've received certain insights, but some of it, it's going to take a long time to play out. You need to recover after. There's a recovery part that's not talked about. Like it's a high load on like your whole system, depending on how you're built, and you need to just be easy and slow with yourself. The ideal is to stay in the same location actually where you drank the medicine for as long as you can. Months would be ideal, but that's not how life is set up, right? So people are flung back. But I would say you're trying to recover and take it easy at first and reflect, and then doing things that or just like mundane everyday life is often a nice way, like letting time go by. Time is required for integration, experimentation, and time. So that's what people neglect. And then, yeah, there's, things like abstaining from substances, sexual contact, being in as much solitude as you can, minding your diet, like your content that you're consuming, like all of the typical sort of like spiritual hygiene and things like that, right? And um, you honor your teachers by like implementing their advice, frankly, right? And your coaches, like if your coach told you to like, then you just come to the next call and you're like, sorry, coach, like I'm just not, it's like you wouldn't even do that. So why are you going to do that with ayahuasca? Why are you going to do that with yourself? Right. So I think there's a responsibility and commitment on your part. And, you know,
Yeah, I like that advice with time as well. Because one, I think, especially in the West, we're very impatient because we can get everything at the literally the click of a button now, whether it's like food or electronics or whatever it is. So we're like, I want to go to this ayahuasca ceremony and I want to like feel great, even though I wasn't feeling great before. And often it's a time thing. And I think my big, if I give my own experience, my first ceremony that I did, my big takeaway was almost like you mentioned, yin and yang earlier, and I felt like I was always trying to like fix the world and like everything's going to be light and love and stuff, and just realizing there is this dark underbelly, that black side of the yin yang symbol, the like dark feminine, the chaos, and it's always going to be there. And just more learning to accept it versus like fight it. That was my big takeaway. But that was just the first step. I've been on a huge process and I'll be on that process until the day I die of, people in California call it, the shadow integration. And obviously Carl Jung talks about the shadow, right? But it was just the first step of this like lifelong journey that I'm on. So that was a good example of what you're talking about is a timepiece. And it's just one step on as much part of a bigger puzzle.
yeah, 100%. You nailed it. And I like this formula of expression. So first you need to express the new things. Like you start expressing, wow, the chaos is actually this. And you start expressing what was inside to come outside. And then you start experimenting. You're like, cool, how does that fit with my previous identity? Or how does that come hold up and brush up against other ideas I have? And which ones need to crumble? And how do they need to fit together better? And then that's the process of experimentation. So you need grace. You need to give yourself grace. You're not going to get it all right. You need to be able to play. The pendulum always swings between polarity, yin, yang,
Yeah.
positive, negative. So you're going to go too far one way. You're going to go back the other way. Just don't demonize the other side during that process. Just be like, cool. How do they integrate? How do they integrate? And that's the process of integration. That's why it takes time. And then at some point, once it's integrated, you transcend, but you can't transcend without the whole process. And everyone's just trying to like, cool, I got the idea. I've transcended that. Like
Yeah.
it's not how it works at all. Um, so yeah, I think that's how I think about that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
So you mentioned we can talk about both sides of it actually. I thought it was interesting because I believe you were talking about, abstinence and avoiding substances after a ceremony. So maybe we can come to that in a minute. But I think really important is before a ceremony as well. And if you've done ayahuasca a lot of times and you've done it in a sane way, I think it's kind of a given. But I do know I thought I'd bring this up because my friend's sister took ayahuasca and she drunk loads the night before, and then obviously I don't think she even lied to the shaman. She had a terrible experience. Luckily, she survived, which is the
Yeah.
first thing. But like take the rules seriously of the diet and the not drinking and everything else. So yeah, just wondering if you can give advice around like how to prepare for an ayahuasca ceremony in like the weeks and months before.
Kind of a funny answer, but the way to prepare is to listen to the instructions of the practitioners that you're working with. The reason I say that is people have different ways that they expect you to prepare. Some people are like, no coffee, no this, no that, right? And that's good. I'm more in that camp of like, do it as much as you can. Like you get
Mm,
out what you put in. It's a reciprocity game, right?
yeah,
To yourself and to ayahuasca. And so now, I think it's pay attention to what they say because there's different diets. There's some retreats are offering a dieta during the retreat. So you're, drinking the tea of a different plant, maybe a tree bark or something. and you need to have a special diet for that, right? But if another center is not doing that at the same time, then it's different, right? So that's why there's no cut and dry thing. It's pay attention. And if the people you're working with, they do not have any instructions or advice for this, like that's probably also a flag, right? If they're just like, oh no, it's chill, like just jump on in, like all
Mm.
good, you know? Um, yeah.
And then afterwards as well, what would you recommend after? Same thing, like just listen to the
I listen to
practitioner, or
them. They're going to tell
yeah.
different things. And yeah, there's certain guidelines in certain lineages. Like some are like, okay, it's 7 days, without sex, or, three, or whatever it is, right? They have different amounts. And I think it's about respecting the lineage you're working in and the way they do it, basically, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I can give another story though, which is again the first ceremony I did. I did the whole I don't even think it was the practitioner advised, it wasn't even all meat. I think it was just like red meat specifically, like avoid red meat,
Yeah.
and then the 2 weeks before. And then afterwards, I don't think I even read the guidelines afterwards. I was in Uruguay and we went to this like market, and Uruguay is very famous for steak, and I had like a mixed grill. And anyway, that night I was with three other guys who I did the ceremony with, and I was like vomiting all night. So that was a good lesson learned of, yeah, listen to the practitioners both before and after the ceremony.
Yeah, right. And it's okay if you make a mistake, right? It's about what are you trying to do? Like, are you intending? Do you know that you're, and stuff like that, right? There's a little bit of like this like honor and respect and reverence in the process. And then there's also just like, yeah, you're just trying to make yourself have the easiest time for the medicine to work. So you're trying to get your, energetic sensitivities, really your vibration, all of that like high and easy so that when this extremely high
Mm,
vibration plant medicine enters you and goes to run energy through all your meridians and push out all this stuff, like the easiest thing happens. You go through the least shitty experience that you can, right? So you're doing
yeah.
yourself favors with all the prep you do, right? I think that's something important. You know, so and then the thing with different meats and things and fish, some have more complex emotions themselves, and there's a denser sort of energy. So if you have that, there's nothing wrong with that
Mm,
either. People want to be all high vibe. We have to go high, low, high, low. That's how
yeah.
the, but in these circumstances, yeah, for sure. And pork is obviously the one that they've all seemed to, agree not having, and, things like that. But
So we know each other through LinkedIn. A lot of listeners to this podcast is more like around the business community, but with that interest in, spiritual matters as well. What advice would you give to, could either be people running their own company like us, or it could be leading a department, right? Who are more like in the corporate world, don't want to take ayahuasca because they want to be a yoga instructor or be a shaman, right? They still want to stay in business, but they're looking maybe for some like more creativity through the plant. Like what advice would you give to those types of people?
through the plant, but they don't want to drink ayahuasca.
No, they do want to drink ayahuasca, yeah. So they're going, because like I said before, I think a lot of people go take ayahuasca. They may say, yeah, I want to be more creative, right, in my business, but then nothing really changes afterwards, right? So
Mm.
like how can they get the most out of their ceremony and their experience?
Yeah, so I would say it's like view it as a commitment to yourself to implement the ideas that you receive and have the courage, right? Like you receive the vision because you're the one capable of implementing it, you know? So like know that and like honor what you receive and honor yourself and honor your own creativity and imagination and believe in what you can do. And then I would say get very practical and real. Like just anyone who was like a sales leader who went to like a conference with their team and spent like 50 grand on it, they're going to be like, every damn lead that came out of that, we better be all over that, guys. And I'm checking that every day, right? So why aren't you doing the same thing with your own, right, creativity and insights, right? So
Yeah.
I would I would put pen to paper. I would be doing the journaling, right? Writing the nuggets of wisdom that come out, and I would be honoring that and reviewing that with a regular cadence, right? Even if you're working with cannabis, it's the same thing, right? Review it, implement each thing, scratch it out that you've done it, that you've processed it, That's what's missing is like this other more masculine side, the structure, the doing the work, putting in the
Yeah.
effort.
I like that more masculine side, because obviously the ayahuasca in itself is meant to be more of a feminine energy, right? But then if you bring
Yeah,
more of the masculine organization order to the like ayahuasca, which is quite a chaotic force.
exactly. And that whole like imaginative realm, it's a beautiful place to hang out in, right?
Yeah,
Uh, it's a great place to escape to. But again, like we can't stay in there all the time or we impede our ability to actually be effective.
yeah, 100%. Well, love what you're doing, Jake, and really enjoyed the show. I've learned a lot about ayahuasca and what's happening down there in the Amazons. Just wanted to give you a last chance. Is there anything, like, obviously we'll put the website, your websites in the show notes, but anything else you wanted to promote to the audience?
Just have the courage to follow your heart. That's a huge message of mine is just have the courage to follow your heart. And if you're low on courage, like send me a DM on LinkedIn and I'm happy to get on a call and fire you up a bit. And you can fire me up a bit too. And if you're someone who identifies as like spiritual, but also a business person, and it's really important to you to like integrate these, and sometimes spiritual stuff's a little too, it's not really grounded, right? And
Hmm.
sometimes some business stuff is just lacking the spiritual tone. A lot of us are on this middle path. So I've created something called In Spirit. It's a play off of LinkedIn with the in. And the idea is we're creating this conscious professional network to really unite everyone that kind of shares that identity in the world. We have a campus component. There's educational videos about ayahuasca in there from a maestro ayahuasquero, the one we work with. His name's Zach. We have all kinds of folks in there. So anyway, it's a lot of fun. Come find me in there if it like resonates with you.
Amazing. Yeah, we'll definitely put that in the show notes as well. And yeah, thanks a lot for coming on today.
Thank you, Michael. Cheers. Appreciate you
Cheers.
having me.
So that's the end of another show on ayahuasca. This is the first one we've done without Tom Jenkins, who I'm sure is listening to this. But let's get into the takeaways. So for me, there's three things which are related to approaching an ayahuasca ceremony and then what to do afterwards. So it is about trying to find a good shaman. Firstly, really look into it, because there are a lot of shark, snake shamans out there who you don't want to be responsible for your soul, for your spirit during an ayahuasca ceremony. So, what can you do with research? As he said, look into them. What ceremonies have they done? And have they been trained by the lineage of shamans? So, like Jake was talking about at his retreat, he's got local Peruvian shamans who have hundreds of years of ancestry in it. And he's got a North American shaman, but that person has been trained by that lineage, as he called it. That was the word he used, lineage. So that's the first thing. Be very careful with who you choose in terms of getting a shaman. Second thing, the preparation. Okay, if you trust this shaman, listen to their advice, right? So if they tell you not to eat pork, tell you not to drink, you need to take this seriously. This is medicine. This is not recreational drugs. And the last thing is afterwards is important as well. As I was telling my story, where I ate a mixed grill afterwards and was vomiting because I didn't listen to the advice of my shaman. So, firstly, find the right shaman and then listen to their advice both in the before and the after. If you know someone who has an ayahuasca ceremony coming up or is thinking about it, send them this show. If you can leave a review of this podcast or a comment on YouTube, that's really appreciated. And we'll see you on the next episode. Cheers, guys.